We like to think we live in a world of rules, countries are sovereign, borders are respected, big powers don't bully small ones. Everyone plays by the same international standards: laws, treaties, diplomacy. That's the promise of the rules-based international order. And for a while it looked like it might actually work. After the Cold War, dozens of countries joined NATO, the EU, the WTO. Trade boomed, dictatorships fell. People started talking about a flat world where geography didn't matter and power was just a bad memory. But here we are, 2025, and the world's not flat. It's lumpy, jagged, territorial again. We're watching the return of an old pattern: great powers carving up space, defining zones, pushing smaller states into line. Not always through war, but through pressure, deals, intimidation, military drills, and economic leverage. Spheres of influence are back. Look at Russia. Putin didn't just invade Ukraine to block NATO. He wants to dominate what he sees as Russia's historic backyard. Georgia, Belarus, Kazakhstan. These aren't just neighbours. They're pieces on a board Moscow wants to control. Then there's China. Beijing sees itself as the centre of Asia. Taiwan is non-negotiable. The South China Sea. Claimed, patrolled, militarised. China isn't just defending its territory, it's asserting its region. And through its Belt and Road investments, it's extending that influence far beyond Asia, into Africa, Latin America, even parts of Europe. And of course, the US has its own zone. Always has. Latin America has been called America's backyard for more than a century. Washington doesn't tolerate much competition there, whether it's Chinese telecoms, Russian military ties, or foreign naval bases. The Monroe Doctrine never died, it just rebranded. So what happened to the rules? Well, they haven't completely disappeared. The rules-based order is still alive. But it's under stress. And part of the reason is that it was never strong enough to eliminate power politics. It only managed to contain it. The order gave countries a shot, especially the smaller ones. It didn't guarantee freedom or safety, but it gave you tools, a way to resist pressure, a way to join alliances, appeal to law, trade across borders without picking a side. If you were Finland or Singapore or Ghana or Chile, the rules gave you breathing room, a chance to play the field, to modernise, to diversify your ties, to not be crushed between empires. But that space is shrinking now. When big powers feel insecure, when their dominance is slipping, they fall back on old habits. They tighten control, they draw red lines, they demand loyalty. And if you're small, that's when the trouble starts. Because in a world of spheres, small countries don't get to choose freely. They get squeezed, bullied, bought off, or just ignored. The old idea was, if everyone plays by the rules, even the small players get a voice. The new reality is, if you don't have leverage, you're just terrain. So what do we do about it? We could cling to the ideal, that every country is sovereign. That might doesn't make right. And we should. That principle matters. But we also need to stop being surprised when power politics returns. Spheres of influence never really went away. They were just held back by a system that's now losing altitude. Pretending otherwise doesn't help. It makes policy naive. It gets people hurt. So maybe the smart move is this: defend the rules where we can, strengthen the system where it's still working. But stop ignoring the way the world actually operates. The more honestly we see it, the better chance we have of navigating it without everything falling apart. Because in the end, we're not choosing between rules and power, we're trying to make them coexist. And if we don't manage that balance, if rules vanish and raw power takes over, then the next 20 years won't be about diplomacy, they'll be about survival. And one more thing, because this part often gets missed, there's a kind of smug fatalism in how some people talk about spheres of influence. You'll hear analysts, diplomats, even academics say, well, this is just how the world works. Big powers dominate their region. Small countries have to fall in line. As if it's just nature. As if resistance is naive and wanting something else is childish. But that's easy to say when you're sitting in a big capital city with nuclear weapons and a seat on the Security Council. It's a lot harder when you're a country of 5 or 10 million people, caught between giants who don't ask what you want, they just expect compliance. People in smaller countries have agency, they have ambitions, they care about their future, and often they don't want to be trapped in anyone's zone. They've spent decades trying to escape that dynamic, building trade relationships, strengthening democratic institutions, joining international organisations, trying to be part of a wider world, not just someone else's chessboard. And what happens when the world turns around and tells them, "Sorry, your freedom is inconvenient now"? That's when blood gets spilled. Because nobody wants to live under threat. No one wants to wake up knowing that if they hold the wrong election, sign the wrong treaty, host the wrong official, they might lose territory, lose sovereignty, or lose lives. That isn't order, it's extortion, and it breeds fear, anger, and resistance. Just look at Ukraine. For years it tried to walk the line, cooperate with Russia, flirt with Europe, avoid provoking anyone too much. But eventually it became clear that no amount of hedging would guarantee safety. Russia didn't want neutrality, it wanted control. And once that was obvious, Ukrainians chose to fight, because the alternative wasn't peace, it was subjugation. The same is true elsewhere, in Georgia, in Taiwan, in the Baltics, in the Balkans. People aren't stupid, they know what spheres of influence mean in practice. A future where their choices are vetoed by someone else's army. So when analysts speak about these dynamics as if they're just geopolitical weather, natural, inevitable, unchangeable, they're not being realists. They're being callous. They're writing off the actual human cost of living under permanent coercion. A truly realistic view of global politics should account for how people respond to being cornered. It should recognise that forcing countries into someone else's orbit against their will doesn't lead to order. It leads to backlash, resentment, conflict, and sometimes war. Because the world doesn't divide neatly into comfortable zones, people fight for their independence. They always have. And if we forget that, or dismiss it, or treat it as a footnote to great power competition, we will keep walking into catastrophes we could have avoided. So yes, the rules-based order is imperfect. Yes, it coexists uneasily with power politics. But it offers something spheres of influence never can. A voice for the small, a shot at dignity, and a world where peace doesn't require submission. And if we let that idea collapse, we'll find out very quickly how dangerous a world of pure spheres really is.